Hey, how you doing, Rebecca? How are you? How's
I'm
everything?
awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been yeah, I know we kind of been in like sort of conversations on email and stuff, and it's kind of yeah, it's great to make it happen. What have you been up to recently? You kind of been on. There's quite a bit going on, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, which is kind of crazy. And literally, like, we just sold our house of 9 years, and we have another one. We're moving further into the woods and the wilderness, which is
Nice.
awesome. But yeah, the timing is all just happening right now. So I'm wrapping my head around moving and like getting a good strength workout, lifting a lot of boxes and stuff like that, and a lot of gear. So that's what I'm doing right now. But I'm also getting ramped up for Rebecca's Private Idaho. I've got
Hmm.
some Idaho expeditions, bike packing stuff I'm doing, and super exciting is in July. We're launching Rusch Academy online
Oh, nice.
classes. For first one will be on gravel cycling. So yeah, I got some cool stuff happening.
That's cool. And yeah, congratulations about the recent gravel Hall of Fame and yeah, getting inducted into there. And yeah, that's
Thanks.
amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, good stuff going on. It seems like whenever we feel like we're at capacity and we can't do anymore, and then you have to move and like something else happens. So just figuring it out and juggling, but it's pretty cool. It's summer here in Idaho, and June's my favorite month because it's all green and the flowers are blooming. So definitely doing some exploring around my new location, which is only 45 minutes away from the old location, but
Okay.
exploring a new backyard, which is cool.
Like, what was the reason behind moving? Did you guys just fancy a change, or?
We wanted to get a little further out from town, and we live in Ketchum and Sun Valley. We've both been here 25 years. Awesome area, but like we just wanted to go deeper into the woods, and we'll still have
Nice.
to go back to town to like grocery shop and all that, but we'll be moving, surrounded by public lands and wilderness and just more animals than people. So we're just getting a little
Yeah.
bit further out.
Nice one. Cool. Well, I'd love to kind of take it back if that's okay with you, because before you moved there, you grew up sort of like around it was Chicago, wasn't it? Around the suburbs there, and
Yeah, Chicago suburbs, Midwesterner is a great place to grow up, and got into sport there with cross country running, and eventually learned to rock climb there, and then I decided I had to head west and get into the mountains when I once I started rock climbing.
okay. And like, was rock climbing, was that around college, or was that sort of after,
It was just
like
after
afterwards?
college. Yeah, I had a degree in marketing and kinesiology, and I knew I liked sports. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I actually got a job at this really posh new health club in downtown Chicago that was 7 stories high. It was like this giant, massive, really, really fancy health club, and in the center of it, they had a 100-foot high climbing wall, and it was one of the first. It was when climbing gyms weren't, a thing. And
They
so
weren't everywhere, right? Like,
no, and you
you can
walked
find them in
in,
every town, kind of thing.
yeah, now you walked in and there's like 100 feet high climbing wall, and I was just like,
Wow.
I got to try that. So that was my foray and introduction into climbing and really outdoor sports, learning inside, and then realizing with climbing that like I needed to be in the mountains, and I fell in love with outdoor sports by working, in a gym that had a climbing wall.
And yeah, did that sort of then just give you the itch, and you thought, okay,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I
gonna
did.
pack in the job, and
I did a lot of climbing around Illinois and Southern Illinois, and like some great rocks and crags there. And so I spent a lot of time outside and just camping in the dirt, and it just really reinforced my love of being outside. As a kid, I used to camp in our backyard all the time and be like, "Mom, can I camp in the yard again?" And so I've always been drawn to being outside, and learning to rock climb was just really like, okay, yeah, I need to make being outside part of my life. And so yeah, I moved west and got a job as a climbing instructor and a climbing guide and working in outdoor stores, and that just really launched paddling and all sorts of other stuff. Adventure racing, came into the play there when
yeah.
so I went from Chicago to California, and now I'm in Idaho. I've been here 25 years, but I think that outdoor itch has, I was born with it as a kid. I loved just being dirty and going camping, and it was pretty fun. So I've tried to make my life around that.
And was there was it just sort of morphing into like, was it like one thing would then lead to another, like you're saying? So it was like climbing, and then that would, then you were looking at rafting, or like, would you say it was like a personal thing, like a personal itch, or was it the people that you like, and the
It was the
community that you
people.
surround? And
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us, we might identify as like, I'm mostly a cyclist or mostly a runner, but everyone I know runs and hikes and bikes and does some other things. And so it was just, I was hanging out with outdoor people, and they kept
yeah,
being like, do you want to try this? I'd be like, yeah. Do you want to try this? Yeah. So I kind of surrounded myself with the outdoor people, and that just really led to invitations. And I really just tried to say yes instead of no. And I didn't have a lot of experience in these areas, but people were willing to like hold my hand and take me along for the ride. And then I ended up teaching climbing and being a river guide, and being able to teach other people. And yeah, it all kind of led to cycling. There wasn't a plan of like, I'm going to be a professional athlete or I'm going to do
yeah,
this. It was just these cool opportunities. And it's kind of a lot about, what the rad season is about, is like, what's something cool I could go do? And people were willing to invite me and bring me along. And I think that that's an important part of like building your community, is like inviting your friends. They may not paddle, but like help them out, give them a boat, teach them some skills, or take them camping, teach them how to navigate. I mean, that's how we all learn. Is there's tons of cool stuff on the internet, but I really feel like we learn from personal experience with friends. And that's
yeah.
how my whole career has been.
Yeah, and like back then, it wasn't like you could kind of jump online and find out what was going on, and
No,
there'd be
you
all these
could buy
apps
a
and
book.
everything.
Yeah, you could buy a book on navigation
Yeah,
and try to read it. And, of course you do that, you study, but then you got to have hands on. You got to go out there and like ask questions. And, adventure racing was really, I did 10 years of adventure racing, and that was really a master's degree in outdoor education, because you're navigating, you're paddling, you're carrying stuff, you're figuring out all the gear. And so it was a lot of really cool trial and error. And I really encourage people, want to get a bit of education first, but then you just kind of got to go out and like camp in your backyard or go bike packing and try it.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, there wasn't the internet to search it all up, but there was old fashioned books. And
yeah,
but it hasn't changed that much. It's just where you find the information.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what was the first adventure race, the first like kind of endurance event?
Yeah.
Would you say that you did?
Yeah, the first adventure race I did was a 24-hour race in Malibu, California. I was running Rock Creation. I was the manager and part owner of this awesome climbing gym in Santa Monica. And all these adventure racers, I didn't know what it was. All these people were coming to the climbing gym that just didn't kind of fit in. They were wearing like lycra tights and like the wrong outfit. They weren't like climbers. And they came in and they're like, we need to learn how to rappel. I'm like, oh, come on, this is a climbing gym. Like, we don't teach rappelling. Like, rappelling is just the way down.
Yeah,
And they're like, well, we do this thing called adventure racing. We need to learn how to rappel. And I was like, okay, I will charge you. I'm a business person. I'll charge you. I'll teach you how to rappel. Like, you're going to have to climb up, and then I'll teach you the down. And they were practicing for adventure racing. And I came later to know that they were like the elite of the elite, like John Howard, Kathy Sasson, Robin Mencasa, Ian Adamson. They were like the most world-class people in adventure racing at that time, a sport I hadn't heard of. And they were coming to my gym. And so we became friends, and they're kind of like, again, an invitation. You should try this small race here. There's a race coming up. It's an Eco Challenge qualifier. I'm like, what's that? What's Eco Challenge? So I got plopped on a team for this 24-hour local race. And really, I only did it because I needed some motivation. I was kind of slacking off. And I'm like, okay, I'll try it. I'll go do this 24-hour thing. And of course, at the time, adventure racing has to be co-ed. And so it's hard to find strong women. And they're like, okay, you climb and you paddle. You don't bike. You were a runner. Like, okay, you'll do. And so I got thrown into a team. And we ended up winning the race over all these like elite teams that had matching uniforms and team names. And we were kind of this ragtag, group of people. We won the event, and the prize was the prize was to go to Eco Challenge Australia, all expenses paid. And I was like, I don't want to do this for 7 days. Like, that was horrible.
You were just roped into it, and like, you
Yeah,
you
they're
gotta do
like,
it now.
"Oh, we gotta go. It's a free trip to Australia," was basically how I looked at it. I'm like, "Okay." And, so that was my first big adventure race, was Eco Challenge Australia. And luckily, all those really elite racers, a lot of them were spending time in California. And so they sort of mentored me along as like this newbie. And I got bit by the bug. We didn't finish that Australia race, but I was just like, oh man, this is like so cool. And that launched me becoming a team captain, and yeah, like managing a team for 10 years for adventure racing. And it was a really cool period of my life. And that launched into bike riding, just kind of in a really strange way. It was sort of a pretty big tragedy. A friend and teammate on another team was killed during an adventure race in the Pacific Northwest, with rock fall right in front of us. And it was pretty traumatic experience for me, and for our team, and kind of like, we don't do this stuff because we want to die. And so that was a pretty down period. And at the same time, on the heels of that, we lost our team sponsorship for adventure racing. And it was just kind of like, I'm sitting there going, okay, what now? And honestly, again, an invitation, a bunch of friends were like, come do 24 hours of Moab with us. And I'm like, come do this bike race. And I had no interest in bike racing. I sucked at cycling. I hated it. It was my least favorite of all the sports that we had to do in adventure racing. But I went to hang out with the girlfriends, and we ended up winning that race. And I had the fastest lap times of any woman, pro included, on the course. And keep in mind, I'll tell you, I was running all the technical parts because I sucked at mountain biking. Literally, I cannot emphasize. So I'd like ride real fast on the fire road parts, jump off my bike on the technical, run down, get back on. But I think I had this fire of just, I needed to burn off some steam, and like, just ripped that race. And then my now husband, he was our support crew. He'd done 24 hours solo racing, and he's like, you know what, you should do this solo. And I'm like, no, I'm not a cyclist. And he's like, no, you should do this just because of your endurance and your mindset. And so he convinced me to do a solo a couple months later, and I won the race overall and beat all the men and everything. So I went to my, couple sponsors that were still left, including Red Bull. And I was like, I don't have anything. I'm going to try this 24-hour bike racing thing. They're like, great, no problem. Keep it going. And my second 24-hour race was nationals, and I won that. And that really started this cycling trajectory of.
Were they fully supportive? Were they like, we've,
it was
like,
cool.
They were going to back you, and
yeah, I called up Red Bull. I'm like, look, my adventure racing team's dead. Everything's dead. I've got nothing. And they're like, well, look, you've got a year left on your contract. Find something rad to do. So like, we're not going to take the money back. And it was really cool. I think if I hadn't had them crossing over, and it wasn't enough to live on. It wasn't like a huge contract, but it was enough of a boost of confidence for them to say, you know what, find something else. Like, we're good for the year. Like, no problem. So I knew I had one more year. I figured I'd go rip around and try these. Okay, I'll try these 24-hour races. And honestly, I looked for the longest things I could find, because I knew I'm not really skilled in all the sports I do, but I'm really skilled at going long and endurance. And so I looked at ultra running, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And that's where I was like, well, this 24-hour racing, 24 hours is pretty short. I can handle that. And if I got to run my bike, I'll run my bike. So it was really, I was just looking for what to fill the time for a year on that Red Bull contract. And that launched really the more successful second half of my career, that was cycling, which was my least favorite, least skilled sport of all the things I did. And it's become a really beautiful blessing for them to kind of give me the confidence and that boost to be like, go ahead and do it. And then again, my husband, he's like, I'll crew for you. I'll teach you this. He's a really good cyclist. And yeah, I went from there, and I've, won 24-hour worlds a few times, and that really kind of bridged the gap between my adventure racing endurance, love of exploring, and then with a new venue of cycling. And that's still going strong with, I'm doing a lot of bike packing now and bike expeditions. So I feel like I've come full circle with like my skills of navigation and all that stuff from adventure racing are now coming into the cycling for me.
And like, would you say it was kind of like, was your confidence then? I mean, obviously with everything changing, going from adventure racing to cycling, and then like having those wins, it would have just been building, wouldn't it? And then sort of like the people then like backing you and
yeah, it built, and partners were like, oh, okay, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this bike thing for a while. So yeah, that kind of built. But I will say, my internal confidence was really lacking. I felt like a total imposter syndrome of like, technically I sucked on a bike, and I'm like, I'm embarrassed to even ride with people because I'm not a very good cyclist. But what I could do, like I said, was go long and stay up all night, and I knew the nutrition for it and the mindset for it. But no, my confidence was kind of like, I'd show up at these bike events and just like ride in the back because I didn't want anybody to see I couldn't ride like the technical drop and all that stuff. So
that's so funny. Were you doing like kind of expeditions between races as well, or like were you kind of just focused on the events?
There were kind of phases. I was pretty focused on the events for a while. So it was like 24-hour racing was my thing, and I did that really strong for 5 years or so. And then I kind of morphed into some mountain bike stage racing and raced a lot, like around the world, and then that morphed into 100-miler racers like Leadville. It was like I was getting shorter and shorter, and Leadville kind of launched into gravel races, and gravel races launched into me, starting my own gravel race 10 years ago, Rebecca's Private Idaho. And then now that's kind of all those skills are piling up on now launching into bike packing and expedition. So I would say there were kind of these distinct patterns of, and what was kind of, what was cool at the time. People were like, oh, you were ahead of your time with 24 hours and then Leadville and stage racing. But it was more the way I wanted to ride. And the racing for like a good 10 years of super hard racing and coaching and really specific training, that was awesome. And that has really laid a cool foundation for me to be able to go do these expeditions and have that training background now.
Yeah. And like one of those expeditions was the Ho Chi Minh Trail when you cycled across the whole thing. Like, was that your idea initially, or was it kind of like a team thing where you were kind of speaking to people about what to do, or how did that all?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, I knew Red Bull is pretty awesome. They've really pushed me as an entrepreneur and an athlete, and they've never once said, you have to do this year. It's a really different partnership relationship. Every year they're like, okay, what do you want to do? Bring some ideas to the table. What's never been done before. And so it was kind of, again, that nudge of like, well, what do you want to do? And they're supportive of the racing, but they're also like, is there more? And so I was racking my brain, and I knew I wanted, exploration is kind of in my soul. And I just started thinking like, what has nobody done? What would be a cool expedition? And so, the thought of riding the Ho Chi Minh Trail, but with the reasoning of connecting with my dad and going to the place where he died and the map coordinates, it was like, it's so obvious now, but at the time it was just sort of coming to me like, I love navigation. I've never really been to Southeast Asia. Oh, I have all these questions about my dad. And so it kind of came together as an expedition idea, and I pitched it to Red Bull, and the first 2 times it got shut down and they said, go back to the drawing board. And this is where I had to learn to write a pitch. I had to learn to like express what this expedition could be. And on the 3rd time, it stuck, and they said yes to logistically help me. And I wasn't like, we're going to make a film. I just wanted to go.
Oh, okay. This was just like, you just wanted to go there and kind of like see the side.
Yeah. I need money to help me go do this. I needed funding and I needed logistical support. So that's where I was coming from. And then they saw that in the story, like, oh, this would be a good film. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. If you want to make a film, that's fine. But I want to do this ride. And so it was definitely a push-pull of like my goals. And don't get me wrong, I'm so grateful we made that film and were able to share that story. But that wasn't my initial motivation to like, let's make a
To do
movie.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think comes across that I'm so driven and pure and like want to do this ride. And to be able to, it's really hard to be able to capture endurance riding or endurance anything and get into the mindset of the athlete. And I feel like, the Red Bull team and especially director Nick Shrunk did a really good job of understanding me. And I'm pretty stubborn and competitive, and I like had my mission of doing this ride. So they had to really, be a fly on the wall and let it unfold as it would unfold. And it was pretty magical. It changed my life. It helped me understand my dad, myself, my reason for why I do these long rides, and launched a foundation because of it. And yeah, it really was. I feel like then the next really big phase of my career is like, yes, I want to do expeditions. Yes, I want them to mean something for myself, but for other people. I want to inspire people. It reinforced that I want to try to tell stories through film and through podcasts, because it really does bring everybody else along. And so I feel like that was just such a clarifying ride for me. And it took me years to process what it meant. I came back home and like was in a pretty dark place for a while of like, what did this ride mean? How do you follow up like the most important ride of your life? What do I do with this information? So
did it change relationships with like how you thought about events and just cycling in general, right?
Yeah, it really helped me. Like, why am I doing these things? And don't get me wrong, the podiums, winning, like I still really love all that stuff, but it's not the only thing, and that is a foundation for more purposeful work that I want to do. And I'm not saying it's not purposeful to win races, because I needed that stuff and all those wins and world championships to actually help build like the layer cake, but it's not the only thing. So yeah, it really helped me fortify in my mind what I'm doing. And I really try to encourage people. Like I wrote out kind of my guidelines, and I really try to encourage people. Like sometimes you just sign up for something because it seems fun, and that's good. But like processing it after, like what was that experience? I met some new people. I connected with community. I like did something that I thought was really impossible. Like we're building and growing. Each event and thing that we go to is teaching us something. And it's become really apparent that, the trail is my teacher. And I call the concept dirt dharma, because like I figure out what I'm doing when I'm out on the trail and in the dirt. And I'll go back to that young kid who was drawn to the backyard to be in the dirt. Like I kind of knew I needed to be in the outdoors and I need to go exploring, but it wasn't until after Blood Road and the Ho Chi Minh Trail that I was able to consciously articulate why I'm doing that stuff.
Yeah. Would you write anything down before you did any of these things, or during or afterwards? Like,
well,
it was like before you did Blood Road. Were you kind of documenting anything, or?
I wasn't a lot. I mean, I have to give Nick Shrunk has become a really good friend. He was the director. He was pushing, I was researching. Typically, I research the area that I'm going to go. Like I'll read a novel from Australia, or I'll read like cool books from a place that I'm going to go. So I kind of do like historical research.
Just to get a feel of what it's going to be like.
Yeah, to kind of immerse myself. But I wasn't doing internal research, like to your point. And until Blood Road, I was required to keep a journal every day. My teammate Gwen and Nick made us write journals, and he made us do written and voice journals. And that has carried over. So now, I do process. And this is kind of where I say, I still will research an area I'm going to go and like get excited about it. But I'm also doing internal research too of like, all right, what's this trip about? What am I looking for? What am I getting from it? And so often we're like on to the next thing. And I'm totally,
you don't even really have time to think, right? You kind of just, just on to the next one.
It's like reverse bucket list. And I will say, when I wrote my book, it was the first time I looked back and like looked at what I'd done, and so I do encourage people, look back at the cool things you did in your life, write a little bit down about them. You don't have to write a book, but it's like, we don't go back and like look at photo albums and relive those memories and kind of like pat ourselves on the back of like, I've done some cool shit. Like we're always like, oh, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
So, take a minute, slow down. It is kind of one of my newer sort of strategies is to take a minute and slow down and look back and absorb the experience we just had and be like, yeah, that was pretty cool.
It's almost easy to be in a hurry, right? To kind of
Yeah,
think like once you've done one of these things, then your mind needs something to focus on and train or get ready for whatever it may be, right? Instead of kind of
totally.
just absorbing it in. And like, were you doing like I watched your TEDx talk, which is incredible, and that was kind of afterwards. Were you doing public speaking before the movie, or like, and like how did that kind of all
I
start?
was doing public speaking a little bit because it's kind of but it wasn't like
It's part of being an
rehearsed.
athlete, I say, right? Like
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
part of
when you're
being an
doing
athlete.
interviews
People
and
ask you to talk and share your stories. So I would say,
yeah,
yeah, I was doing that. But the experience of doing a TEDx talk, it's
yeah,
really rigid and they force you into a structure and they force you to like have a through line and an outline. And I had
okay,
never done that process and it was freaking hard. But I learned so much about how to communicate, even like and through the Blood Road film tour, also I did a lot of interviews, and I asked some athlete friends like who'd had films. I'm like, what do I talk about? And they're like, well, organize like 2 or 3 thoughts in your head ahead of the interview, and then just talk about them. And it
yeah,
seems so simple, but like, I mean, even this, like, I love that ahead of time you're like, well, we're going to talk about these things. I'm like, okay, great. So I learned a lot about communication from Blood Road and the film tour and TEDx and trying to get our ideas across in a concise way. Because communication, like we don't practice it. I mean, you learn speeches in school, like I was required to give like presentations or whatever, and then we
yeah.
never do anything else with it again. But communication is our main tool in this world to like connect with each other. So yeah, anyone who gets a chance to do a TEDx talk, it's freaking so dang hard, but do it.
I didn't know they had this whole structure, but yeah, that's sort of
It's really rigid.
it
Yeah,
makes sense now looking at them. Like it's kind of
yeah, they want them to fit in a format, and so they
yeah,
force you ahead of time. You're turning in outlines. You're doing. I mean, it is like a school project. You don't get to get up there and just give your speech. Like whoever's organizing it has the leadership of it. They basically sign an agreement that we're going to have our speakers do this.
yeah.
So it is like a school project.
And with the Dharma and kind of like looking at exploration after the film, what did you have in mind, or was there anything that you sort of wanted to kind of set out on doing, whether it's sort of going back to events and kind of pushing that, or
Yeah, it became really clear that I wanted to do big expeditions. So,
okay,
long expeditions with a purpose, back to kind of eco challenge days of exploring different countries and cultures and exploring myself inside. I mean, those long events where you're sleep deprived and you're scared and you're nervous and there's massive commitment, that's a different story than doing a bunch of intervals and training really hard to go 20 seconds faster on a course you've done before. Like,
yeah,
again, I'm glad I did that period of, you know, hardcore racing, but it's deeper now to want to do these expeditions because they combine everything. That you do have to be an elite athlete, but you've also got to have the navigation, the mindset, the gear, the organization, the logistics. Like, it's a more complete experience for me. And so, yeah, I came off Blood Road really clear that I wanted to get back to expeditions. And so Kilimanjaro came next. I've done a bunch of cool Idaho bikepacking stuff. I never really gotten into in the last 5 years winter bike expeditions. And so that's
yeah.
been,
Which
riding
is
it.
like over in Alaska, right? When you did the Iditarod and like,
Yeah,
how
Iditarod.
was that?
I've done it 3 times. The short race, which is only 350 miles. And I'm working up towards 1,000 mile, hopefully next February, which will be a month
Okay,
on the trail. And
wow,
yeah, the winter expeditions are very committing. And luckily, I have a really good mentor and friend in Idaho, Jay Peterberry, who puts on winter bike races here. And he's been an instigator. He's like, Reba, you should come do this stuff. He used to do adventure racing. So we've known each other a long time. I'm like, I'm no good in the cold. I'm not doing it. I hate the cold. I hate the cold. My lungs, my hands, I can't do it. And he's like, you can do it. So he's been kind of mentoring and helping me for a number of years and convinced me to go to Alaska the first time. And our plan is to together next February to do the 1,000-mile together, and try to document it and
Okay.
do it, tell the story, because he's done it 15 times. He's won it 9 times. He's like the legend of the Iditarod Trail. And so I asked him, I said, could we go together and try to film this? And honestly, to film in minus 40-degree weather with batteries, and I mean, you're in survival mode. It's a really big challenge, which is why I'm like, let's do it together. Let's try to show people what this trail is really like. I mean, I've self-filmed the 3 years that I've done, and it's pretty hard. But yeah, so that is our plan. That's the next really big expedition that I have coming in February of next year, and committing a month on the trail, and living in sub-zero Arctic living outside.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, what sort of preparation goes into that? I mean, like, now that you've kind of done, like, well, I guess I wouldn't even call it a mini version, but like the shorter version of it, right? 3 times. And then sort of like, are you sort of looking at everything from like going into the cold, so it's like breathing techniques of being in that environment, and like it's all self-sufficient, right? So you bring everything with you.
Yeah, you got a hotel on wheels. So there's a lot of factors of like, what do you bring? How heavy is it? Is it gonna, So honestly, this has been a 4 or 5 year from me doing Idaho winter bikepacking, because Jay, made me do it. And then building up to the 3 years of Iditarod. I mean, so far it's been a multi-year preparation, and each year, like, I tweak the gear a little bit differently. The first year I really had trouble eating, and so now I make a lot of my own food, and I've worked with the nutritionists of like these special cookies and what is edible when it's frozen, and how to keep your feet warm, how to sleep outside, how to all the kind of thing, everything down from, what socks you're wearing to what sunglasses so you don't get snowblind. There's a ton. So it's been a multi-year preparation, and I still feel like a real newbie, but honestly, I chose this really big, scary thing because I felt like I needed something. I needed to see if I could, I started doing winter bike packing at 50, basically. So, 49, 50. So I needed to see, like, could I go to the next level as an athlete? And yeah, the answer is yes, which is really cool.
And how do you then do it with the equipment? For example, filming it when you guys are gonna do that. Is there like, so you need like special housing, so things don't freeze over, and like,
it's so crazy. Housing won't even work. It's like basically all of your electronics and things, you make a vest and everything's close to your body, and you can like take it out for a few seconds, and then it has to go right back in. So you can't film everything, because your body is your only heat source. And otherwise everything, but yeah, you're trying like all these different things of like where to put the camera, how to use the camera, how to put tape hand warmers around it to keep it warm. But honestly, things just have to go in next to your body. You generate heat, and then it's a tedious, and you can imagine those tiny little SD cards when it's minus 40 and you're like,
battery's gone. Oh no.
So there are quite a few things that don't get captured on film, but I'm excited. It'll be gritty. Won't be perfect. It's not like it's going to be a blood road, Emmy Award winning film crew. Maybe it will be. But I just really feel like I want to show people how magical it is out there. Not that they'll go, but that maybe we'll protect our environment, and you see how special these places are, and you'll appreciate them. It's why I launched Rebecca's Private Idaho gravel event, because it goes way into remote Idaho, and people go there and they're like, wow, this is special. We should not fuck this up. So I want to show people, hopefully to inspire them, but also to show the beauty of our world. And literally in Alaska, you're howling with the wolves and looking at wolf tracks next to your bike tracks. And that's pretty special for people to get to see. I mean, it's like watching, you know, anything we watch on TV. We want to immerse ourselves in experience, whether it's World Cup racing, we'll never get to do it, or whether it's the Iditarod Trail in Alaska. So it's
Yeah.
the power of showing is, you know, a lot of what I learned from Blood Road too.
Yeah. And did that, was that then like the reasoning behind like sort of setting up Be Good Foundation and then almost kind of giving back to like the outdoors and kind of inspiring people as well at the same time, huh?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. When I set up Be Good Foundation, and I'll just say my dad, you know, it came to me on the Ho Chi Minh Trail when I connected with my dad, and he signed all of his letters home from the Vietnam War with the words "Be Good," and that script in the logo, that's his handwriting. And I just really heard those words for the first time. It's like, "Be good," and like, wow, how can I take that? How can I listen to basically what's my dad telling me? He's teaching me. He's like telling me to be good. And I just thought a lot about it. And one of the biggest things I learned when I was over in Laos along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and riding, and it was awful to learn it, is the amount of devastation and the unexploded bombs that are still there. 50 years later, there's bombs still killing people from a war that ended 50 years ago. And Laos is the most bombed country in per capita in the history of our earth. And it's, you know, remote villagers who can't farm their land because our garbage is still there. And I heard that loud and clear from my dad. You know, he had remorse about being there and being a fighter pilot. And I felt super strongly that he brought me there and asked me like, hey, we still have work to do to clean this place up. And so Be Good Foundation was launched first with the mission, and one of our core projects, it still is to clear bombs along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to like, you know, leave that legacy. The foundation has expanded to have other bike projects, and the mission statement is to use the bicycle as a catalyst for healing, empowerment, and evolution. And I chose those words because that's what the bike does for me. And so, you know, I've taken groups back, you know, pre-pandemic for 4 years, Mountain Bike Lao, where we ride along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We meet these people, we help clear up the bombs. We sell bracelets on my website that are made from bombs that are cleared along the trail by Lao villagers and engraved with words "Be Good." And the bracelets go back to clear more bombs. And then we also do other cycling projects, you know, that are focused around protecting public lands and open spaces. Basically, getting people on bikes and places to ride, you know, is kind of a lot of the core of the foundation. And so we partner with a lot of different groups that are getting people on bikes, and whether it's kids or adults or underserved communities, or going on bike rides that, like in places in Lao that are helping clear that area. So yeah, the bike is such a powerful tool. And you know, what I learned in Southeast Asia is that everybody understands a bike. Everybody understands a traveler. You arrive anywhere in the world on a bike and like you're instantly taken in. People see that you're on a journey and they get it because everyone rides a bike, no matter where you are.
Yeah, that's cool. And where did all the like? I'm like curious about. You've got some equations which you kind of I guess are almost like and like one really curious one with it sort of like the dogs are teachers. What is that about? That was
oh yeah, the dogs are the Tao of the dog. So when I was writing my book, I really learned this from you know, animals can teach us. And I'd be writing my book and I'd be stuck and writing is the one thing I find it's different than athletics, and the harder that you try, the results don't necessarily come. Whereas with sport, you can just try harder. You can do more hours, more intervals.
You can put in more time, right? And it will just sort
of, put in more time, but that doesn't work in a creative sense. And so, you know, my dog would come up, I'm sitting at my desk, he'd put his head on my lap and be like, you know, we need to go outside. I'd go for a walk with him for 15 minutes, and suddenly like the ideas would come again and my creativity would come again. And so, yeah, having dogs, honestly, they've shown me that we need to be outside in nature, that nature really is for our own mental health and wellness, like the sound, the colors, away from a screen. And so if anyone doesn't have a dog, you need to get a dog because they make you go outside twice a day. You got to walk them, you know, you got to be out there. And so that was kind of just a revelation of being in nature. They wake up happy. They love to eat. They love to sleep. I think we get mired in, all the importance of, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But
Yeah.
one of the sort of healthiest things I've done is been having a dog, because it makes me go outside twice a day and just sit. And oftentimes I'll go out in the morning and I'll take the dogs out and I sit by the river. I do a little headspace meditation app for 10 minutes, and it's really cute. They sit down right next to me and they just wait. And then we continue on our walk. So
That's cool.
the energy of animals is pretty fantastic,
Yeah.
if you listen.
Yeah. And would you say that was sort of like where some of your ideas would come from then, right? It's kind of, it is getting outside and it's going
Nature.
on.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I say Dirt Dharma. And we've all done it. Like, think about, you're like working on a project, you're stuck on something. You go out on a bike ride and 2 hours in, you're like, oh yeah. Like, I figured it out. And so it's like blood flow is brain flow. And if you move the blood in the circulation, the ideas come. But I think as humans, and for sure me, we get stuck in this part of our body, like our head. We get stuck in our mind, and then we forget the heart, the soul, everything else, the rest that's connected below your neck. And I do find when, I go out and do long stuff, suddenly 20 minutes in, my mind shuts down, the noise shuts down, and I'm just in the moment. And it's why I really love endurance sport, because you do get into that flow state, and it's, neurochemicals are released. It's scientifically proven that at 20 minutes, you start to release endorphins. You start to, your body is doing what it needs when you move. And this is why, movement is medicine, and people need to get outside for 20 minutes, an hour a day, because literally you are releasing chemicals in your body that are good for you. But it takes us a while to learn that, I think what's cool is ancient practices, are now meeting scientific proof of this is good for us. This is why if you're outside in sunlight, your ocular nerves are taking that in, it releasing things that make you feel happy. So exercise, we got to get out and exercise.
Would you say before, like years ago, when you kind of started doing, when you did these races and when it all began, were people kind of not be judging, but looking at you going, what are you doing? Why do you kind of keep on pushing it with these events and almost?
Why is a really big question. I don't get it as much anymore because people are starting to adventure, which is really cool. And I think during the pandemic, people started going exploring. They got out of the gym because they couldn't go, and they started walking around their backyard and being like, wow, this is cool out here. So I mean, I've been asked why do you swim the Grand Canyon? Why did you ride Kilimanjaro? Why do you do 24-hour racing? That's insane. Why do you do adventure racing? I don't get asked why as much, but I'm also better articulating why. And I think our world is understanding exploration now, and people are wanting to get off the beaten path, and they're wanting and needing to find mental health somewhere that maybe isn't in the gym. And not gyms are great because you get the blood flowing, but it's different when you go out in nature. And I'm excited to see that the world is getting that now. And I do think the pandemic accelerated it because public transportation was shut down. People had to ride bikes. People had to get out there. The explosion of gravel cycling is very much akin to this, as people want to go adventuring. They want to get off the beaten path. They want to go somewhere that they haven't seen before. And it's been happening for decades, moving us towards explorers and adventurers, but now we're really in it. So that question of why I do this crazy stuff, it doesn't come as often. And they're like, how? I guess the question has changed from
how do you, from why to how, right?
That's insane. They get the why, but they're like, how the hell do you ride your bike in Alaska?
That's awesome. When you went over to Iceland, was that the first time that you've been over there? So when you went from sort of one crossed it pretty much, right? That was.
I've been to Iceland once before with my husband. We did a really cool race there. It was a mountain bike stage race that was in the summer. And so Iceland is stunning. And then I got an invitation totally out of the blue from an acquaintance, Chris Burkhardt. I mean, we knew each other as we like move in the same circles, but we'd
Yep.
never ridden or done anything together. And he had this idea to cross Iceland in winter, to do a north to south crossing with his friend, Gus Morton, and neither of them had ever ridden fat bikes. So they're like,
Yeah, like we're just gonna give it a try. It'll be fine.
totally. I mean, yeah, it was kind of audacious. Chris called me up. He's like, and they're like, well, who do we know that does a lot of fat bike riding? And they'd seen my Alaska stuff. So they're like, Chris is like, I can call Reba. Let me ask her. I kind of know her. And literally, yeah, it was a phone call. It's like, hey, do you want to go do this thing with two guys you don't really know who've never ridden fat bikes or done a fat bike expedition? And I was like, okay. I'm like, here's my gear list. Here's all the stuff I'm taking to Alaska this year. And Iceland was 1 month after Alaska. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go do it, but you have to prepare. And they did. They dialed in their gear. They were really good students. And Chris organized all the logistics and really fun people to do an expedition with. And so it was pretty cool. I mean, I would say, yeah, they were beginner fat bikers, but not beginner explorers and not beginner cyclists in any way. And so that was a really cool crossing and expedition. And, it was 7 days, some pretty intense weather and conditions. And, you really kind of bond on an expedition like that. But because of the wind and all that, like we couldn't speak very much. We're just kind of silent because your face is covered, the wind is howling. And so it was a lot of nonverbal communication, which was pretty cool. And now there is a film project I am here that Gus has been working on, and this happened to me in Blood Road too with my teammate Huen. Is I didn't know all the things she was thinking because she's Vietnamese and English. She doesn't speak that great of English, and I don't speak Vietnamese. But then when I saw the film and started to see her voice or her the translation of her interviews, I was like, couldn't believe the depth of our understanding of each other without being able to communicate. And the same thing has happened with this Iceland expedition of we didn't talk a lot. We didn't talk about really deep, intimate things because the wind was blowing. We couldn't, we're trying to survive. But now I'm, the depth of this story with Gus and his sort of internal exploration with I Am Here has been, it's a story of addiction and, mental health and again, using a bicycle and physical expedition to heal. And we're in the middle of a Kickstarter for that to get that film finished on the Iceland expedition. But it's a really cool juxtaposition of how we use our physical body to push ourselves to really access our emotional body. And the film is not your typical adventure film. It's actually really about Gus's personal story. So that's going to be really cool. I can't wait for it to get finished.
Nice. Cool. And you've got the private Idaho event coming up in August. What else? Is there anything sort of that you've got that you're working on at the moment? And
and Rebecca's Private Idaho is 10-year anniversary, which I can't believe. It's my signature gravel event in Idaho. But I'll also tell all your listeners everywhere is that we've got Private Idaho Remote. So what that is what we've taken from during the pandemic is you can compete and put a little team together wherever you are, and you design a course that meets a elevation and a distance profile, and you execute it at home. And we've got leaderboards and prizes, and we had 11 countries take part last year. So cool. People can kind of and the idea is that you form a little community at home and you put together a cool route and people ride and fundraise. So RPI Remote is open to anyone. And then RPI Base Camp, which is an 8-week training program with me and my coach, that starts July 4th. So anyone can jump into that as well. It's a digital training program with me and my coach, and you get your own customized training. So those things are coming up to launch. I'm launching Rusch Academy, which is also gravel instructional courses, because so many people are asking questions about what tire pressure, what kind of bike, how do I find an event, all this kind of stuff. So I'm launching that in July too. So a lot of cool business stuff, but it's all around, again, this concept of sharing and and providing knowledge and inspiration for other people. I've got a couple films launching. I've got a Idaho bikepacking film series that's out right now on Outside Plus called Connections. And then
Nice.
I'm, really obviously hot and heavy into training for Iditarod 1,000 Mile in February. So I'm staying home in Idaho and doing a lot of my own bikepacking things here at home. And sadly, I had to just pass on. I was supposed to be leaving in a couple weeks to do a summer Iceland trip with Chris again. And it was so hard, but I had to just decline because there's too much other stuff going on. We also just sold our house. We're moving.
Yeah, we're moving to throw that in the mix, right? You kind of.
I mean, it's a lot, and that's where we have to look at ourselves. And I had to really evaluate, and I had to go back to what I developed after Blood Road, which I call my navigational handrails. And I spent some time after that film and the film project, kind of wondering, what am I doing with my life? Like, where do I go next? And I really wrote down like some guidelines for myself. And one of them is less equals more. And it's really hard to pass on a cool expedition somewhere, but I got to do this stuff at home first, and then make room for the next expedition that I'll get to do. So those are hard decisions everybody's got to deal with. And if you don't have a little bit of a map for yourself, it's really hard to weigh those decisions.
Yeah, especially if if these kind of opportunities and things are popping up quite often, as I'm sure they are, right? So it's then kind of sort of juggling, deciding what you're going to do, and
it's awesome to have a ton of choices, but we can't do them all. And I think that's something that like we talked about earlier, is taking a minute to slow down, and we can do everything at 50%, 40%, or do less things at 80 or 90%. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But yeah, a lot of cool stuff coming, and I'm super excited. And you have an extended invite to Idaho if you ever want to come ride here.
Awesome, thank you. And what's the best way if people want to reach out and get in contact? How can they do that?
Yeah, socials, website, it's all Rebecca Rusch, Rusch. Everything's there. Private Idaho's on there. All sorts of good stuff is on there. And then hopefully, Rusch Academy will be launching in July. And, on the plans for that there'll be gravel classes on there, but I'm also going to, get some bike packing classes, hopefully some navigation, like really give people some tools like we talked about earlier, to go exploring on their own.
So for all the questions everyone has, basically, it's like from anything kind of technical and I
hope so. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Rebecca. Really appreciate your time. And it's going to be exciting to see what you're up to with the Academy and the event, the 10-year anniversary later on. And it's going to be cool to watch.
Well, and what are you doing next? What are you excited about that's coming up?
I've got a few. There's a UN Ocean Conference over here in Portugal next week, so I'm speaking at that for Ocean Film Festival.
Cool.
And just a few kind of speaking things. It's a bit weird kind of taking it like 2 years doing this every week online, and now kind of taking it in person. So we're sort of doing a few things like that with Rad Season, and then events are back as well. So we have like 1,000 events on our website. They've all come back.
I love it. Cool. Well,
so it was everything kind of went paused, and now it's returning, which is amazing. So
I mean, it's awesome, and we learned stuff in the pause. I think we all learned things that we're taking into the reopening of the world. And I'd love to invite you if you want to bring Rad Season to Idaho and capture some athletes here and do some interviews with people on the ground. You're absolutely welcome. That would be really fun.
Awesome. Cool.